Welcome to the Barbados Genealogy Group meeting for July. This one was a couple of weeks in coming. It has engendered quite a lot of interest, but we are here today. And we apologize for any inconvenience caused because we were forced to postpone because of some technical issues. So I want to greet those of you who are joining us on Zoom, as well as those on Facebook Live. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Harriet Pierce, and I am the coordinator of the Barbados Genealogy Group. Today, we welcome no stranger to the group, Miss Marcia Nurse, who will speak on identifying archival data to locate ancestors enslaved, freed, and free. In this presentation, Marcia will discuss aspects of the research techniques she has utilized to locate her African ancestors, both within the Parish of Saint Joseph, Barbados. For Marcia, this presentation during the Season of Emancipation is designed as an inspirational tool for approaching genealogical and historical research, utilizing original documentation created by both the colonial authorities and modern-day exponents. Just a little bit about our speaker, Marcia. She's a long-standing member of the Barbados Genealogy Group, a special interest group of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. And she continues to dedicate much of her time to conducting Barbados genealogical and historical research, utilizing online websites for access to Barbados baptisms, marriages, and burials. And furthermore, she focuses on inspiring persons to mine these online records for information, which directly speak to the lives of their ancestors. Of course, many of you have known Marcia from visiting the Barbados Department of Archives, where she has been a fixture and is always very eager to assist visitors with their research and in navigating the records. Over the past years, Marcia has completed extensive research into both her maternal and paternal lineages and has shared selected information within the 2018 Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, as well as other public platforms hosted by the Barbados Museum, the Barbados Department of Archives, and other local groups. So I think we are in for a treat this evening. But before we hear from Marcia, I just want to remind persons to hold your questions until the end of the presentation. And you can either type your question in the Q&A or use the raise hand feature if you would like to ask your question or make your comment on mic. And we will allow you to speak. To separate the questions and the comments, we ask you to put your comments in the chat section and your questions in the Q&A. So over to you, Marcia.
Thank you, Harriet, for that introduction. Thank you to the Barbados Museum and Historical Society for inviting me to present today. This presentation has a strong focus on genealogy records during the Age of Abolition. In identifying archival data to locate ancestors enslaved, freed, and free, naturally I'm drawing on material from within England's 17th February 1625 to the 29th of November 1966 colony Barbados West Indies. And the material shows the link between the island of England, 94,354 square miles, to the continent of Africa, 11.7 million square miles, to the island of Barbados, 166 square miles. Underpinning the research is clearly the transatlantic trade in Africans. Now, the selected records described cultural discourses about gender, race, and fertility, insofar as these shaped and were shaped by British politicians' attempts to mold the reproduction of the island's labor force to the needs of the emerging global capitalist economy. Utilizing a somewhat limited historical archive, these records expose aspects of the history of the British colony Barbados and its place in the Atlantic world well into the early 1900s. Exposures of records offer glimpses of high politics and also of what we might call a micro-political level through our lens, looking into the lives of our four generations of a single Barbadian family and a few of their associates. Their story, exposed on archival data, is the story of all African Barbadian families of today, rooted in Barbados pre-1834. These records offer context as to why such families should support the 21st century regional and national thrust for reparations from Britain and other European countries whose wealth was built on the abuse and genocide of millions of Africans born free and Barbadians born enslaved. Now, it's very important to acquaint yourself with the use of important online sites because these expedite your record research by identifying archival data. Now, the first site I'll speak here quickly about is ellisisland.org, which is mainly records of the early 1900s manifests. And these detail individual, passenger, crew member, and ship information. You will, if all the pages of the manifest have survived, be able to see the physical attributes of some of your ancestors on these records. The records are also available of Barbadians traveling from Panama to the United States in the 1900s, from Panama to the USA. Now, CaribbeanFamilyHistory.org deals with burials for the years between 1600 to 1900s. And you must remember that the island parish churchyards and the West Parish Cemetery were created around 1870, that cemetery, in the parish of St. Michael. In earlier centuries, churchyard burials were for whites only. Small burial lands outside and bordering some churches' graveyards were available for the freed persons of color. By 1827, one such was consecrated in Bridgetown. FamilySearch.org is a very important site. You can use this from the comfort of your home to access baptism, marriages, burials recorded for the years between 1600s to 1900s. And many of these records have an actual image, the page within the book, uploaded from the books of the Barbados Department of Archives. You should also note that the 1900 sailing list of Barbadians traveling to Panama sailing list in the 1900s and other records related to their lives, marriages, and burials in Panama are available on FamilySearch.org. Ancestry.com is important because the demographic data information within the 1817 to 34 returns of slaves registers for all British colonies is found on this site. UCL.ac.uk was created by the Center for the Studies of British Slavery, Department of History, University College London, and the website offers access to Barbados's data related to enslavers by names, white Christians and Jews, free mulattoes, free colored, free black, free Negro, Christians. Plantations named under their ownership, the numbers of enslaved persons under ownership over the years, histories of ownership and legal representatives, short histories on enslavers and their families. The site lists not only plantation enslavers and the numbers of enslaved persons thereon, but listed are individual enslavers and the numbers of their enslaved persons. The site shows individuals' monetary compensations at 1834 or thereafter. Some maps of Barbados are available. Some information was referenced from the Barbados Hughes and Query papers. Now, you must recognize some important procedures and information evidenced in some records of religious rites within the colony Barbados, West Indies. And as I said, the online books exist for Barbados's baptism, marriage, and burials. And these are under the rites of the denominations of the Church of England, Wesleyan, Moravian, Roman Catholic, and Judaic religions. All denominations compiled records of marriages and burials only for those persons placed in their local baptism books. No enslaved persons were married pre-1834 under the rules of all religious denominations and the rules of England, reflective of the unity of church and state. So I'll start from the information with regards to the Church of England, today known as Anglican. They locally recorded in churches baptism books for those persons who had proofs notarized of baptismal records created in another colony or England. An example, one of my enslaved ancestors was taken to England, freed by his enslaver, recorded baptized there in 1823 and described as a free black man. Later, he returned to Barbados pre-1834. Proof of his baptism was placed in a Barbados Church of England baptismal book. This was identified after locating his 1835 marriage. The Emancipation Act was effective in British colonies on the 1st of August 1834, followed by the mandatory apprenticeship system, which ended in 1838. The Wesleyan and Moravian compiled baptismal records pre- and post-1834, where the enslaved, freed, or free persons, places of birth, were stated as a region on the African continent. On such records, some of these persons carried names rooted in African culture. These were noted in one column, and then in another column, the new European names allocated by the priests were recorded. This also was applied to those persons with African names born in Barbados. Now, other Christian church information relative to identifying the records of the 70,000 to 80,000 plus persons annually enslaved in Barbados pre-1834 to 1838, and I call this the age of abolition, and I'll refer to that as we go through the presentation. Looking at baptismal records, most persons enslaved had no baptismal records pre-1800s. The few persons enslaved with baptismal records pre-1800s may not have mothers named on places of abode. Their enslavers will always be named. Greater numbers of persons enslaved were written into baptismal books from about 1817 onwards. The listing cover adults, children, and infants. Often mothers are named on children's and infants' records. Their enslaver will always be named. All persons enslaved did not have their fathers named on the baptismal records. None will have surnames in the surname column. Both of these situations continue to occur on many records 1834 to 38 and onward. Their enslavers will always be named. Burial records. Most persons enslaved had no burial records pre-1800s. The few persons enslaved with burial records pre-1800s may not have any information on the records concerning their abodes. At the time of death, their enslavers may be named on the burial records. Slightly greater numbers of persons enslaved were written into burial books from about 1817 onwards. Some records may state abodes, and all will state the names of their enslavers. An enslaved person's death was recorded as a decrease during the years 1820 to 1834 on the returns of slaves of their enslaver. For over 200 years, enslaved persons buried their kin and comrades in burial grounds in plantation lands within every parish. For many years, post-1834, the freed remained on lands of former owners and continued the burials under their rites of passage. Now, there are two types of records stored at the Barbados Department of Archives, which may assist you in the research, and these identify individuals pre-1834, at 1834, and post-1834. In the age of abolition, you may want to utilize this Barbados National Depository as a source for one, a list naming enslavers with inventories. Inventories of Christians and Jews contain information about an enslaver's assets, including the names of persons enslaved and their values, placed on those individuals by the assessors of the enslaver's estates. Assessments of enslavers' human chattel occurred during mortgage arrangements, chancery court proceedings, or to ascertain the values of a deceased person's estate at their death. Such assessments relate to plantation owners and to individuals without plantations. Inventories start around 1764. A list of the years reflective of wills and deeds of enslavers. Now, wills and deeds of Christians and Jews may contain the name or names of one's ancestor or ancestors enslaved, freed, or apprentice. An enslaver may have included a special request, not exclusive, of gifting an enslaved person or person to another person. Gifting an item or items to an enslaved, freed, or apprentice person, offering manumission or manumissions to an enslaved person or persons. An enslaver may have identified kingship tie or ties to an enslaved, freed, or apprentice person or persons. A limited number of manumissions are available under a separate file. Included in post-1834 wills can even be the offering as a gift to another person, the formerly enslaved person or persons who were under the apprenticeship system from the 2nd of August 1834 or under the Apprenticeship Act from 1838. Now, questions to explore if you're unable to identify a burial record. Did an ancestor die in Barbados, and never have a burial record? Did an ancestor die overseas? Now, let us just take a moment to understand that the unrecorded deaths and burials stretch over 2 centuries, 1600s to the 1800s, when you consider that between 500,000 to 600,000 enslaved Africans landed in Barbados. Yet, in 1834, there were only 82,807 persons recorded enslaved. Approximately 95% were recorded as Barbados-born. Bodies of persons linked to Barbados were disposed of without records created under Christian or Jewish rituals. Disposals were by fire, in the sea, swamps, deep ponds, the soil. Contributing to deaths were acts of nature, malnutrition, disease, starvation, and natural deaths of enslaved, freed, and free persons and their descendants. The 1780 hurricane killed approximately 4,326 persons. In 1831, hurricane killed 1,189 persons enslaved. These are recorded on the 1832 returns registers and noted. The deaths are noted as decreases. The 1854 cholera epidemic claimed the lives of approximately 30,000 persons, most of whom were or descended from formerly enslaved persons. Burials recorded in Christian burial books, but some persons may not have been recorded due to social and other critical scenarios. Was an ancestor a victim without a recorded burial? 1854, 59, 63, 75, 76, 87, and 95 riots for access to clean water, ground provisions, food on plantation lands. Was an ancestor a victim of restraint followed by death without a recorded burial? The 1898 measles outbreak, the devastating hurricane when 10,000 lost homes and an estimated 100 died. Riots for food. Did an ancestor succumb? Without a recorded burial, was an ancestor a victim of restraint followed by death without recorded burial? When we look at immigration, unrecorded, no exact numbers and no names of immigrants, and recorded immigrants by exact number and with names. Did an ancestor die naturally or unnaturally in any of these countries? The areas persons emigrated to, historians have stated that between 5,000 to 7,000 persons left Barbados post 1840s down into the late 1880s, and they immigrated to British colonies of Trinidad, Demerara, Essequibo, Berbice, and other South and Central American countries, including Suriname, Panama, and Brazil, the late 1800s. Not much is said about Panama, but there was a huge exodus of men at the start of the Panama Canal by the French in the late 1800s. And that exodus is recorded on the 1881 to 1891 census done in Barbados. The African countries I will mention today, firstly, Belgium's colony, at the time it was called the Congo by King Leopold. And in 1892, 294 men, unnamed, are recorded to have left Barbados for the Congo. There's no record of what happened to them. However, an indication online states that on arrival, as they were disembarking and they saw what confronted them, some of them tried to escape and they were killed right there on the beach. The United States 1880 American Colonization Society had taken a large swath of land in Africa and named it Liberia. By 1865, it was a republic, and 346 named Barbadians left Barbados for Liberia. We do not know how many of those persons actually stayed in Liberia and are buried there. I think that's important data to be collected. And of course, the United States, some persons say that there was an exodus of people pre-1865 and early post-1865. I also question that because the United States emancipated their enslaved people in 1865. Now, to gain some historical knowledge of countries where one's African-born ancestors originated, I'm suggesting these sources. I do believe this type of research will encourage persons to explore the continent of Africa before European colonization. The first the first item here is a YouTube video titled An African History of Africa in Conversation with Zainab Badawi. Secondly, the 2024 published book, An African History of Africa from the Dawn of Humanity to Independence, researched and authored by Zainab Badawi. And there are 20 episodes available on YouTube, The History of Africa with Zainab Badawi. Whether you choose one, two, or all three, I can tell you the time invested is well spent. And you will learn so much about Africa before European colonization. This moves me straight into an ascending family tree rooted in Barbados, 1956 to 1789, 1790. And what we must understand is that the naming within a family, it was influenced and is still influenced by England, Christianity, Israel and Judaism. And in this case, Africa, Akam, the religion of the Akan people. And a journey like this, it leads to the discovery of digital records and paper trail reflecting familiar connections, social and religious norms. So I'm at the base of the tree and I've selected my mother, and we will start with records from 1888 to 1859, 1832, 1805, 1803 to 1789, 1790. I'm not going to spend time on this slide. I'll leave it to you to pause and read it in your own time, but this is the research on the appearance of the Cobham name on the landscape, physical landscape of Barbados on maps. And from 1681, the name was shown on the Ford map. And then right through, I was able to trace that the Cobham, white Cobhams were landowners right into the 1816, 1900s period. And I also did an analysis of the 1849 to 1871 Church of England burials for persons surnamed Cobham. And you can see clearly that St. Michael and St. George had the highest numbers of burials under the Church of England, followed by St. Joseph. Now, the first record we look at is the 1888 Church of England baptism record. And this was identified at the Chapel of St. Matthew, St. Michael, Barbados. And the record shows that the book was formatted where you have when baptized, when born, the child's Christian name, parents' names, Christian surname, mother's maiden name, the abode, the residence, rank, occupation, or profession of father. Of course, at this time, there's no provision, for the name or the profession of the mother. And on this record, it reconfirmed what I knew. My grandfather's name was Valdemar Eustace St. Clair Cobham. I also knew that my great-grandfather was Charles Cobham and his wife was Margaret Elizabeth Cobham. What I learned from this record was that my grandfather was actually born August the 8th, 1888, and he was baptized October the 1st, 1888. It was a surprise to me to see that my great-grandmother was surnamed Went, a name that research has proven there's no paper link. And even up to today, we are unaware of any blood link to the Went family. And then I saw Hainsbury Road was the residence, and that the profession of my great grandfather was a tailor. Now, I also learned that Charles's middle names were James Fox, so he was Charles James Fox Cobham. Now, the 1886 Church of England marriage, identified at the Cathedral and the Parish Church of St. Michael, proved the marriage between Charles James Fox Cobham and Margaret Elizabeth. The format of the book allowed for when married, the name and surname, the age, condition, rank, occupation, profession, father's name and surname, rank, occupation, or profession of the father, of course, not the mother again, signature of groom and bride, witnesses. And from this record, I learned that the marriage occurred on September the 16th, 1886. Charles James Fox Cobham was 27 years old, a bachelor, a tailor by profession, living at Hainsbury Road, and he named his father as Samuel Thornhill Cobham, with a profession of sub-immigration agent. That was new information for me, and obviously it speaks into the history that I mentioned before. Now, Margaret Elizabeth, on this record in 1886, before the birth of her son, the priest wrote her surname as Ward. Again, there's no paper trail, evidence of the Ward connection, neither up to today has there been any proven familiar blood link. It stated she was 19 years old, a spinster, a seamstress. She also resided at Hainsbury Road. On this record, I recognize that Charles James Fox Cobham was literate. He signed his name, but the mark X of Margaret Elizabeth Ward, so she was illiterate. William Henry Ferguson was named as one of the witnesses, and research has been conducted on him and his father, close friends of the family. That record took me now into the baptism, which occurred in 1859, of Charles James Fox Cobham. And on that record, the book was not laid flat, so I couldn't see the actual date of the baptism, but his date of birth was June the 18th, 1859. Charles James Fox Cobham was baptized with his parents' name as Samuel Thornhill Cobham and Henrietta Frances Cobham. The couple lived in Suriname in Saint Joseph, Barbados, and he was stated as a postman. The maiden name of Henrietta Frances was Quinton, and I knew the Quinton name and the association with the Quinton family all my life. Clearly, I was able now to have a good insight into my great-great-grandparents and the fact that Saint Joseph, because I was moved from St. Michael into St. Joseph through this record, that St. Joseph would play an important role in the family. The 1854 Church of England marriage identified in the Church of St. Joseph the marriage between my great-great-grandparents, Samuel Thornhill Cobham and Henrietta Frances Quinton. I will state right here now that this is the first proof of the legal and religious application of the surname Cobham. Also, Sam became Samuel, and you'll see this play out as we go ahead. On this book, the signature of the groom and bride were placed in the book, and the witnesses were named as Robert Quinton, who was literate. He signed his name, but Benjamin Aline X, the Markov, he was illiterate. And it would appear that the bride and groom were both literate. The signatures differ from that of the priests who wrote the information on the names of the bride and groom, etc. The 1854 format of the book disallowed for age, rank, occupation, or profession of the couple, their abode and names and occupations of fathers of groom and bride, so it disassociated them from their formerly enslaved parents. The couple went on to have 13 children born in Suriname, St. Joseph. Their first surviving son was identified on an 1855 baptismal record as Samuel Cobham, who was buried in 1889 as Samuel Thornhill Cobham. Now, moving towards the burials of Henrietta Frances Cobham and Samuel Thornhill Cobham, the record indicated the Church of England in St. Joseph that Henrietta died and was buried in 1890 and Samuel Thornhill Cobham in 1898. From Henrietta's record, The format of the book, actually the format of both books in 1890 and 1898, allowed for where the individual was born, which parish. And it stated that she was 53 years old and she was born in Saint Joseph. So again, I knew how important that parish would be to my research. And from her age, she was therefore born around 1836-37. Samuel died in 1898, and it stated he was 66 years old. He was born in St. Joseph, he died in St. Michael, and he was buried in St. Joseph. Henrietta also died in St. Michael, and her body was taken to St. Joseph for burial. Now, before the death of Samuel Thornhill Cobham, there were two events that occurred. The first one was the 1889 burial of their first son, Samuel Thornhill Cobham. And as I stated, he was baptized with the names Samuel Thornhill. During the interim years, the name Thornhill gained importance, and his father inserted it at burial. So Samuel Thornhill Cobham Sr. buried his son 1889 on November the 23rd as Samuel Thornhill Cobham, aged 34 years. He was described as an engineer. His abode was in St. Michael, and his place of birth was Suriname in St. Joseph. The other event that occurred was that after the death of Henrietta Frances Cobham, Samuel Thornhill Cobham, widower, remarried to Dorothy Ann Croney in 1891 in St. George at the parish church. On August 6, 1891, Samuel Thornhill Cobham, aged 60 years, he actually was only 59 years old, a widower, described as a house and land agent, Hainsbury Road, St. Michael. Now, on this record, there was no father name, so a clear disassociation from his formerly enslaved father and his stepfather, deceased, and you'll understand that soon. His bride, Dorothy Ann Croney, aged 45 years, a spinster, named her father as Edward Croney, a domestic. What I also saw in this record was that Charles James Fox Cobham, the adult son of Samuel Thornhill Cobham, was a witness, and therefore he was literate to sign his name. Now, because St. Joseph was such an important parish, I did an analysis of the 1817 to 34 returns of slaves, also called registers of slaves, created during the age of abolition. Concentrating on the parish of Saint Joseph, Barbados, West Indies, I found that there were no enslavers surnamed Cobham. In fact, the 1834 individual enslavers, and these are persons that had no names next to their return, indicating the name of the area that they lived in. So 174 individual enslavers were named, and they owned 1,890 persons enslaved and named. 16 plantations were named, and the enslavers' owners were named, and they owned 2,182 persons enslaved and named. I had therefore identified at 1834 in St. Joseph that 190 enslavers owned 4,001 persons enslaved. To give some context, for political, economic, and social context, the demographic data collected on returns was integral to the fact that by 1835, all enslavers associated with Barbados, whether resident on the island or not, were compensated by England. 1,721,345 pounds, 19 shillings, and 7 pence sterling for the loss of their human chattel property at Emancipation 1834. That amount obviously can be calculated by today's terms, including, of course, interest on the emotional, psychological, and other damages to the enslaved and descendants of the enslaved. Now, the analysis of the registers of the period were important because I was searching for Sam Thornhill as an enslaved child, infant. And in 2018, I identified two infants inventoried for the first time within the 1832 returns of two parishes. And this infant was inventoried with the two names, Sam Thornhill. Firstly, the 1832 return of George Hewitt of slaves, the property of Francis Jones, Reverend Henry Allen, and Maria Roberts of Valley Plantation in St. George. That was the estate of James Mapp Allen, who was deceased at the time, and he also has an inventory at the Barbados Department of Archives. I found on his register his return, one birth, described as an increase, one male, Sam Thornhill, Black, age 1 month, and therefore he was born in 1832. I also found in Saint Joseph, on the returns in Saint Joseph, the 1832 return of George H. Turney of slaves, the property of Charlotte Nesfield, an invalid. A birth, one male, Sam Thornhill, Black, 1 month, Barbadian, an increase. He was also born in 1832. This research was in 2018. In 2018, I also identified an infant. There was no baptismal record available online in 2018. It had not been uploaded as yet for any other child, but one child, Sam Thornhill, in the St. George baptismal book. And the baptismal book was headed Baptism of Slaves. And on the 11th of November, 1832, the person's name was given as Sam Thornhill, his mother named as Mimbo Will. They were classified in the book as slaves of James M. Allen. He's the deceased father of the 3 adults on the return. The 3 adults are his 2 married daughters and his son. So at that point, there was a very large gray area concerning the fact that there was an infant on the registers in St. Joseph, but no baptismal record. By 2019, that record was uploaded, and under baptism solemnized in the Parish of Saint Joseph with the individual owner, the 24th of June, 1832, the child's Christian name was Sam Thornhill. The mother was Sarah Mercy, slaves of Charlotte Nesfield. Now, no other baptismal records existed in St. Joseph for a child named Sam or Samuel Thornhill, who would have been an adult aged 66 years old at death in 1898. The mother and child were disassociated with the enslaved father on the record, which would be customary. The question I had was to locate the mothers on the registers of enslaved people, and I did that. They were both on the registers of 1832 and 1834. And of course, the overriding question would be, was the father of those infants, were they named after a paternal connection to a man called Sam Thornhill? But utilizing Charlotte Nesfield as the enslaver, I then accessed returns in the parish of Saint Joseph. And the England returns of slaves, registers of slaves for the years 1817, 20, 23, 26, 29, 32, and 34 clearly show the format of returns by column, the reason for increase, decrease, the sex, male, female, name, age, color, country, employment. The occupations at 1834 are D for domestic and L for labor. In the early returns of 1817 and 20, you see the actual work that the person did, whether they were a carpenter, mason, etc. And utilizing Charlotte Nesfield's name and Ancestry.com, I was able to locate the 1834 return of George Hunter Turney of slaves, the property of Charlotte Nesfield, an invalid. And in 1834, she had declared one female, Sari Masi, Mafsy, FSY. If there are 2 S's in this time, the first one is an F. 31 years old, Black Barbadian domestic, 1 female, Mary, 13 years, Black Barbadian domestic, 1 female, Dolly, 7 years, colored Barbadian, 1 female, Frances Sanley, 3 years, Black Barbadian, 1 male, Sam Thornhill, 2 years, Black Barbadian. She had declared those same people in 1832 as well, so she brought them forward, and therefore her total last registration had been 1 male, 4 females, and that applied to 1834, but she declared as well that there was an increase because it was a birth. And that was 1 male. The infant was named, inventoried as George Hunter, 10 months old. And that gave her, at the close of 1834, 2 males. 4 females, 6 persons. So the returns from 1820 to 1834 do show all the children as increases. Charlotte Nesfield did not declare that she purchased or was gifted the children. If a child was purchased, it would say purchase of on the name of person who she purchased them for the child from. If she had been gifted a child, it would say gifted of on the name of the person who gifted her. Neither of those statements were placed next to any of the children. Clearly, the 1834 Saint Joseph returns were extremely important in the research. Now, also on those returns, I found between 1817 to 34, I identified the presence of a man enslaved named Sam Thornhill at Blackman's Plantation. I acknowledge him 99.9% as my great, great, great grandfather, the father of the 1832 born child, Sam Thornhill. On the 1817 return of Charles Cadogan of slaves his own property, Sam Thornhill was aged 12 years, Black Barbadian field, Blackman's Plantation. At 1820, the return of Philip L. Applewhite of slaves his own property, Sam Thornhill, aged 15 years, was declared Black Barbadian in the third gang purchased of Charles Cadogan at Blackman's Plantation. At 1834, the return of John R. Best of slaves his own property. Now, he had purchased the plantation, the people, and the works from Charles Cadogan. He had purchased from Philip Applewhite all the plantation works and people from Philip Applewhite. And I'm moving straight to his 1834 return, where he indicated that Sam Thornhill was now aged 29 years old, Black Barbadian laborer, Blackman's Plantation. By following these ages, you can see chronologically it's the same person, the description is the same. Sam Thornhill was recorded with an adult baptism in Saint Joseph in May 1836. He was described as an apprentice laborer. He was buried in June 1836, Saint Joseph, recorded age 40 years. Based on the 1817 return, he was actually born in 1805. Therefore, he was 31 years old at death. This rounding up of ages happens all the time, so you have to be conscious of it. And it happens way down into records, even in the 1880s and 90s. Now, because Thornhill was clearly a very important name in the story of my ancestors somehow, I therefore did some research on the white male Thornhill enslavers, and I learned that between 1654 to 1780, there were owners of large estates in Barbados. The first listing showed the 1654 Timothy Thornhill owned mangrove plantation St. Thomas. By 1656, he owned Black Rock in St. Michael. By 1680, he owned Rock Hall in St. Peter, St. Andrew. Boundary lines changed slightly. In 1683, he owned Four Hills in St. Peter, St. Andrew. 1690, Bawden, St. Andrews. And then in 1721, Dowden, D-E-N, Thornhill owned Spring Hall, St. Lucie. In 1764, Dowden, I-N-G, owned Upton, also known as Barrows, St. Michael. In 1770, he owned Lion Castle, St. Thomas. By 1767, Henry Thornhill owned Harrison, St. Lucie. In 1769, he owned Locust Hall, St. George. In 1780, he owned Lion Castle in St. Thomas. In 1797, Henry Thornhill owned Plumtree in St. James, St. Thomas. And in 1813, Timothy Thornhill's name is linked to Jackman's in St. Michael. At the time of this research, investigations were completed regarding other persons enslaved, besides the 1805-born Sam Thornhill and the 1832-born Sam Thornhill, who carry the two names Sam or Samuel Thornhill as their mark of identification on returns of slaves 1817 to 34. All others were enslaved outside of St. Joseph. The locations of those other persons enslaved revealed ownership by enslavers surnamed Thornhill, or ownership by enslavers related to Thornhill families, or ownership by persons who purchased plantations and persons from the Thornhills or from their extended families. Examining each person enslaved who was inventoried as Sam or Samuel Thornhill, Their ages and abodes revealed what apparently could be a strong patriarchal relationship stretching from this period into the mid 1700s. Some women enslaved with the second identifying name of Thornhill were also investigated. This is part of a huge research project. I also understood too that in 1661, the honorees included the first Thornhill recorded in Barbados. Loyalty to Charles II brought a deserved reward. At the time of the Restoration, His Majesty conferred the dignity of knighthood on 13 gentlemen, more than ever had been knighted in all British plantations in America. The honor of baronet or knight was conferred on February 18, 1861 to John Colleton, James Modiford, James Raps, Robert Davers, Robert Hackett, John Worsham, John Yeamans, Timothy Thornhill, John Whitham, Robert Lagarde, John Rawdon, Edwin Steed, and Willoughby Chamberlain. In 1673, 5 of these men, Davers, Hackett, Thornhill, Lagarde, and Worsham, were counted among those as the most eminent planters on the island. I think you can understand the depth of this research. Moving back to my family, I wanted obviously to know more about the children and their mother. And based on the registers between 1817 to 34 of Charlotte Nesfield, I was able to find the baptism records of all the children that were listed on the registers between 1820, 21, 23, right down to 1834. And those children were entered into the baptism book of Saint Joseph by their enslaver Charlotte Nesfield and George Hunter Turney. And Mary Elizabeth, Charlotte Ann, and Thomas were entered on the same day in 1825, Dorothy in 1828, John Richard in 1830, Francis Hanley in 1831, Sam Thornhill in 1832, and George Hunter in 1834. All these records disassociated each child from his or her father. The children were described with a mother named Sarah Mercy. So Zary, Sarymafsy, was in fact Sarah Mercy. And they were described as slaves, the property of Charlotte Nesfield. It is my understanding that the priests were paid by the Church of England for every person recorded in the books. This is an overview of Sarah Mercy Nesfield, recorded as the mother of the children described, and they were described as black and colored, and one had no color description during enslavement 1817 to 34. I think we all can understand inner spiritual, mental, emotional, and outer environmental, racial, and social challenges facing persons at this time, and certainly facing Sarah Mercy and her children that she was named as a mother of. Now, references for racial classifications as authorized by Conrad Adams Howell, Esquire, the 1817 island treasurer who was in charge of the collection of demographic data for all the returns of slaves in Barbados, 1817 to 34. The state, church, and individuals focused on the escalated breeding of humans to predict and ensure 1, the future labor force across Barbados, and 2, maximum institutional and personal monetary compensation for loss of their chattel human property at emancipation. This chart shows that during the age of abolition, I was able to establish that the children's year of birth, based on the fact that their ages were placed on the first register they appeared on, and subtracting that particular age from the year of the register, I established that Mary Elizabeth was born in 1821, Charlotte Ann in 1822, Thomas in 1824, Dorothy in 1827, John Richard in 1829, Francis Hanley in 1831, Sam Thornhill in 1832, and George Hunter, the newborn, in 1834. I also found on the registers that George Hunter Turney and Charlotte Nestle had indicated to the census taker that 2 children had died in 1832 and that their deaths were due to the 1831 hurricane. It is noted that the burial records were created in 1833 on the 22nd of August. England compensated all enslavers through the parish vestry for the loss of their chattel human property after the 1831 hurricane. Also dying before 1834 was Stated Thomas. In 1826, a burial record was created for him. And in 1835, just 1 year, a few months after emancipation, George Hunter, the infant, was recorded dead. I also noted that 2 male boys, young children, were described as colored and that they had not survived to 1834. The only surviving male child was Samuel Thornhill, described as Black, born 1832. Now, to give a little insight to the education at the time that these children were in the parish of Saint Joseph, I'm drawing on the 1828 dated island-wide educational outreach by all Christian entities. This report covers all of the outreaches by all of the denominations in the island. And this is during the age of abolition across 11 parishes, and we'll concentrate on St. Joseph. The title of the report was the Report of the Incorporated Society for the Conversion and Religious Instruction and Education of Negro Slaves in the British West Indian Islands for the year 1827, in which is included a general view of religious instruction according to the principles of the United Church of England and Ireland throughout the dioceses of Jamaica and Barbados and the Leeward Islands. In St. Joseph, it was stated that there were 5 private schools, and the priest was also able to say that 12 boys and 6 girls were being educated, and in his words, are educated at the expense of the parish. Because no racial designation was placed next to these 18 children, they were therefore white. And the church went on to indicate that there were 24 estates in the parish, and the breakdown of the racial classifications by the church was that there were 890 whites, 90 free coloreds, 4,272 slaves. In the report, the estates I indicated were 24, and the report stated, and I'm quoting, 18 are under instruction and each visited by a catechist once a fortnight. The church's report therefore showed that in the parish of Saint Joseph, there were 5,252 people living at the time. I think this should help everyone with regards to the education delivered to persons of African descent. How did 1832 born Samuel Thornhill become Samuel Thornhill Cobham? Cobham being the name that we are interested in finding out about. In the article I published in the 2018 Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society, I did indicate that the name did not transfer through blood or bondage. And I'll just give this overview. On the 27th of July, 1834, Sarah Mercy, the enslaved female on Charlotte Nespie's 1817 to 34 returns, was recorded in St. Joseph baptism books with the name Sarah Mercy Nesfield and an abode at Turney's in St. Joseph. On the 23rd of May, 1835, Sarah Mercy Nesfield was recorded in the Church of England marriage book as the wife of Cobina, surnamed Cobham. George Hunter Turney had acquired Cobina between 1829 and 1832. On Turney's 1832 and 1834 returns, Cobina was described as 42 years old and 44 years old, Black Barbadian laborer. Their owners continued control of the 2 freed persons under the apprenticeship law. 4 children, located post-emancipation from Charlotte Nesfield 1832 return, continued in the care of their mother, Sarah Mercy, now known as Sarah Mercy, the wife of Cobina Cobham. Mary, who was 13 years old, Dorothy or Dolly, who was 7, Francis Hanley, who was 3 years, and Sam Thorne, who was 2 in 1834, are all recorded by Saint Joseph Church in later years with the surname Cobham. Proof surfaced in 1834, in 1854, as I shared with you, that Sam became Samuel, he retained Thornhill, and he gained the name Cobham when he married Henrietta Frances Quinton. Reverend Henry Quinton of the Church of England owned Quinton's plantation, St. John St. Joseph. It was on the border. He and his ancestors had been the owners of Henrietta's father and other family members. The enslavers, surnamed Cobham, owned Stepney and Applewick's plantation in St. George. No enslaved man named Cobina was listed on either of those estates' returns, 1817 to 34, and I've checked all. So why was that surname applied to Cobina? Well, George Hunter Turney was obviously a man who needed to be investigated, and I started to look at him from 1834 backwards, and he led me from St. Joseph, where he lived, back into St. Michael. And he led me to the 1829 return of Lucretia Turney of slaves her own property. And she lived in St. Michael. Now, to give context, her husband, John H. Turney, died between 1823 and 1826. His 1823 return stated that he owned 37 persons enslaved. Lucretia, his wife, sold and gifted all except 15 persons. And next to those persons, she told the enumerator, and he wrote, being her maiden property, meaning that she owned them before marriage. So in 1829, Lucretia stated on her return, reverted to her at the death of John H. Turney. And the 15 people are listed on the return here on this slide. But I'm not naming them. I'm just going to state that there were 8 males, including one enslaved man named Cobina, 39 years old. So he was born 1789, 1790. And there are 7 females listed, which gave a total of 15. She also stated that between 1826 and 1829, there were 2 births, females. So now she had 17 persons, and she went on to state, sold to 3 males and 6 females to Avis Turney, gifted 1 male and 2 females to Avis Turney. She sold to G.H. Turney 1 male, John Thomas, 28 years old, colored. She sold to Joseph T. Smith 1 male, Joseph, 12 and a half years, black. So that accounts for 14 persons, and it left her with 3 persons at the close of the 1829 return. Those 3 persons were John, 49 years, Marianne, 55 years old, and Cobina, 39 years old. Lucretia Turney died between 1829 and 32. So it would mean that her estate, the people on her estate, her chattel, human property had to be accounted for. So in her 1832 return, submitted by her legal representative, the return read, return of George Hunter Turney of slaves the property of Lucretia Turney deceased, who he is legal representative. Number lost registration, 2 males and 1 female, 3. So that exactly mirrored what was on the 1829 return. And he went on to state, gifted to G.H. Turney, 1 Marianne, 58 years old, Black Barbadian, and 1 Cobina, 42 years old, Black Barbadian. So he listed them as decreases. Death, 1 male, John. He stated he had died. He was a decrease. The date of that return was the 26th of May, 1832. So that is the return for the estate of Lucretia Turney. Now, in 1832, George Hunter Turney has to account for the persons that he was gifted. So on his return, he declared ownership of 2 persons as increases. John Thomas, he owned before from 1829. He also now stated that he owned Marianne and he owned Cobina, but he also indicates that Marianne was manumitted. His 1834 return declared only 2 persons, Cobina and John Thomas, and he was compensated by Britain in 1835 for those 2 persons. Now, I am also offering proof of the 1834 adult baptism for Sarah Mercy, because in order for her to have become the wife of Cobina, it was important that she be written into the baptism books. So on the 27th of July, 1834, 4 days before Emancipation Act was enforced, George Hunter Turney and Charlotte Nesfield placed in the book, the baptism of adults solemnized in the Parish Church of Saint Joseph, her name. Now, the 1834 format, there's no column for mothers or fathers' names, so there's a disassociation from a mother or father enslaved in Barbados or born free in Africa. In the book, she was given the name Nesfield. She became Sarah Mercy Nesfield, her abode, Turney's, St. Joseph. I'd just like to state that I met Sarah Mercy in 1817, recorded on the 1817 slave register as 14 years old, Black Barbadian domestic. She was therefore born in 1803. And in 1834, she was 31 years old. Now, during the system of apprenticeship, which commenced after the Emancipation Act of the 1st of August, 1834, the 1836 will of George Hunter Turney, previously a sexton among his professions, named Charlotte Nesfield as living on 1 acre of his land. He stated that in his will. He stated she was to remain there. The probate is the 26th of September, 1836. I've not found a burial record for him yet. It's probably not uploaded. The 1837 will of Charlotte Nesfield bequests, Bequesth, Sarah Mercy, who is now Mrs. Sarah Mercy Cobham. She's now 34 years old. Mary Elizabeth, who is now 16 years, and Dorothy, who's 10 years old, to the 5 sons of George Hunter Turney at the event of the later death of Turney's widow, Elizabeth Rebecca Turney. The probate of that will is the 16th of January, 1839. By 1839, the system of master and servant act had started. It should be noted that in 1837, those Turney males were between the ages of 7 and 21 years old. Their mother's maiden name was Messiah. It's written as Mafsiah, but we know it's Massiah. She descended from a Jewish family originally practicing Judaism, dating way back in Barbados. She was converted to Christianity. Now, proof of the marriage of Sarah Mercy to Cabina, George Hunter Turney and Charlotte Nesfield had them written in the marriages solemnized in the Parish of Saint Joseph in the island of Barbados for 1835. And named are Cobina and Sarah Mercy, and where the bride and groom are to sign, it says Cobina X, mark of Cobina Cobham. He was illiterate. Sarah Mercy X, mark of Sarah Mercy Nesfield, illiterate. The witnesses were named as Robert Thomas, ex-waterman. I checked him out, and he had an adult baptism on the 29th of December, 1833, with an abode of watermen's near Lamins. Lamins is Lamins Plantation. There was no race attached to him. It didn't say free mulatto, free colored, free Negro, etc. So he was therefore white. And Kitty Ann Grant X. So she was also illiterate. I checked her out too, and she had an adult baptism the 29th of December, 1833. Her abode was near Castle Grant. Castle Grant is a plantation near to Lamins. She was described on that record as a free Black woman. The marriage was written into the book on the 23rd of May, 1835 for Sarah Mercy Nesfield to Cobina Cobham. It should be noted that between 1835 to 40, the couple are named as parents of 4 children. On the 1835, 37, and 38 baptism of 3 male infants, Cobina is described as an apprentice laborer, and their mother as Sarah Mercy, with the surnames Cobham. On the second baptism record, Sarah and Cobina baptized their son, Cobina Cobham. The abode was near Lamins, Saint Joseph, so we get a good idea of the physical location. The 1840 Rebecca Malvina Cobham, their daughter, was baptized. Cobina was shown as a sexton of St. Joseph. He would have been utilized to dig graves, clean the church, etc. The book did not allow, that book for marriages did not allow for the names of the mother and father of Cobina or Sarah Mercy, so it disassociated them from their enslaved Barbadian parents, maybe, or their free parents, mother at least, born in Africa, free. An overview of Mrs. Sarah Mercy Cobham, recorded as a mother of 4 children born freed during apprenticeship 1835 to 38 and free under the Master and Servant Act 1838 to 40. And we see that the first child was born in 1835 in September, and he was named as John Hunter Cobham. He was conceived clearly before the marriage in May 1835. He died in 1837. The first child conceived and born within a marriage was named Cobina Cobham. He was born in 1837 and is baptized in 1837. The third child was named John Edward Cobham, and we should pay attention to those 2 names, John and Edward. And he was born in May 1838. And Rebecca Malvina was born and baptized in 1840. On the baptismal records, Cobina Cobham was named as their father. Just a quick look again at education. And I was able to find in the 2001 Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society this very important paper, Thirst for Knowledge, Education in Barbados, 1823 to 1838. And it lists the parishes, the locales, the schools, the teachers' name, numbers and the racial classification of the pupils. And in Saint Joseph was listed 14 teachers and their locales. Now, we must understand that the white man, Church of England, governments of England and Barbados completely controlled the colonial island Barbados' education to descendants of Africans and Afro-Barbadians. Referring to the history of Barbados by Robert Schomburg, which is an 1848 publication, I think that's the date. Little St. Joseph Chapel School was described as 50 foot by 24 feet and built in 1837 at the cost of £200 sterling. C.M. Turney and Cobina Cobham were named near Clement Rock in St. Joseph as teachers in 1837. C.M. Turney was Chismamo Turney. He was listed as a teacher of 28 children who had no race shown, so he was white. And this information is within that journal, 2001. Cobina Cobham was listed as a teacher of 45 children who were racially shown as C, colored. It should be recalled that on 3 of the baptismal records, 1835, 37, 38, Cobina Cobham was recorded as an apprentice laborer, and by 1840, he was described as a sexton. You should note that the 1835 Church of England's Religious and England's Legal Marriage Record had identified Cobina as illiterate. On the 16th of January, 1846, the burial record showed that Mrs. Sarah Mercy Cobham was 43 years old. You would recall that she was the mother of 12 children who were born between 1821 and 1840. She was living at tenement at Castle Grant at the time of her death. That's another plantation in St. Joseph. In May 1847, widower Mr. Cobina Cobham, sexton of St. Joseph Church, remarried to Sarah Elizabeth Barrow, a widow of St. Joseph. Mr. Cobina Cobham, sexton, died 1854 from cholera. That was noted on the record. He was aged 64 years old in Suriname, St. Joseph. Cobina died 1 month after his stepson, Samuel Thornhill, had been given the surname Cobham at his marriage to Henrietta Frances Quinton. Cobina, who had been surnamed in 1835 by the priest Cobham, was born 1789 to 1790. I continued the research, and on the St. Michael, 1817 to 34 returns of slaves jointly owned by 3 enslavers, and those are the words jointly owned on the return, was identified a man named Cobina. He was chronologically aged the same as a man on the Turney's family's returns. He was described on all the joint returns as an African. On the 3 joint enslavers, one of the 3 joint enslavers was a man named John Cobham, Esquire, son of Richard Cobham, Sr., Esquire, and his wife Susanna Nee Aline of Stepney Plantation, St. George. Barbados-born John Cobham, Esquire, with his St. Michael-based business partner, white England-born Edward Wason, Esquire, placed advertisements in the 19th century local papers to rent a number of enslaved men to work at their Bridgetown enterprise. They were involved in a seafaring enterprise with a certain type of vehicle from Bridgetown to Oistins and to other islands and other areas in the region. Cobina. is a name steeped in the Ghana Empire's Akan Nation of Peoples religious and cultural naming rights. It means born on a Tuesday. For more information on the utilization of Akan Day names, you can refer to this site. Kwabena is the male name for Tuesday, the female is Abina. Based on the archival data on the paper trail, Sarah Mercy and Sam Thornhill's great-grandson, who was also Kabina Cobham's step-great-grandson, Valdemar Eustace Sinclair Cobham, became a student of law in 1906 to 1910 and a solicitor 1910 to 1924. Valdemar Eustace Sinclair Cobham was born in 1888. He was the son of Charles James Fox Cobham, born 1859, who married in 1886 Margaret Elizabeth, whose surname at baptism was Smith. She had a Methodist baptism in 1863. Charles James Fox Cobham was the son of Sam Thornhill, born 1832, who received the surname Cobham at his marriage in 1854 to Henrietta Frances Quinton, who was born 1836. Sam Thornhill, born 1832, was the son of Sarah Mercy, who received the surname Nesfield at her adult baptism in 1834, and she was recorded in 1835 with the surname Cobham through the documentation of her marriage to Kubina. Sam Thornhill, born 1832, was the son of Sam Thornhill, born 1805, who had an adult baptism in 1836 and died in 1836 at Blackman's Plantation. My grandfather, Valdemar Eustace Sinclair Cobham, born 1888, was married under the Methodist Church to Iris Cullimer in 1912, and he died in May 1924. Valdemar's academic abilities qualified him to follow the career of white, skin-toned mulatto lawyer William Conrad Reeves, born enslaved 1828, who died in 1902. In 1910, on his legal professional paperwork, the local white British colonial authorities recorded Valdemar as Valdemar. Research to date indicated that Valdemar was the first black skin-toned Barbadian-born man of African Barbadian descent to pass all British law exams with 100%, which qualified him as a solicitor in Barbados. Valdemar retained the name Valdemar until his burial in 1924 in Barbados, aged 36 years old. Replacing Valdemar as a man of color within the local white legal landscape was the tawny, skin-toned man, Grantley Adams, in 1898 to 1971, the son of Rosa Frances Adams, nee Thorne Turney, who died in 1922, and Fitzherbert Aline Adams. Rose Frances Thorne was baptized in Saint Joseph in 1862 by Charlotte Ann Thorne. For more information on Valdemar's education, exams taken, career, marriage, 4 children, and his descendants, you can refer to the 2018 Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. I'm not going to spend any time on this slide. You can pause and look at this in your convenience, but it gives more information on Reeves and Adams. And the 21st century 2019 DNA results that I did for myself showed the areas in Africa where my DNA is plotted, and I'm confident that contributing to that percentage is clearly Samuel Thornhill and Sarah Mercy. The 22 results are the same, except that they broke up in Nigeria. I'd just like to state that vast regions of Africa, including islands off the continent, were seized and renamed by European colonists in the late 1800s. So it's important to remember this, because you should take your results, look at a modern day map, and then go about identifying the names of regions of ancient maps of Alkebulan, Africa, through the kingdoms, sultanates, and empires pre-colonialization of the continent. And you can check these maps and see the exact regions that your people were enslaved from, as opposed to the names applied to the regions by Europe. I very often think about these words: emancipate yourself from mental slavery. None but ourselves can free our minds. Of course, we know that's from the 12th album, Uprising. Our regional icon, Bob Marley, pictured during the Uprising tour, Dartmouth, Germany, on the 30th of June, 1980. Honorable, by order of merit, Robert Bob Nestor Marley was born in 1945, and he died in 1981. He also was aged 36 years old. In closing, I'd just like to say that this presentation was done by myself in honor of my ancestors born enslaved, freed, and free in the island of Barbados, and in honor of those ancestors born in the continent of Africa and brought enslaved to the island of Barbados. And I leave you with these words: you cannot enslave a mind that knows itself, that values itself, that understands itself. The words of Wangari Maathai, born Wangari Muta, 1940, died in 2011. Kenyan human rights activist and Nobel Peace Laureate. I should hope that aspects of this presentation educate, enlighten, and inspire the Republic of Barbados and the world. Thank you. We now open the floor to any questions and comments. I need to take a sip of water, and certainly you can go ahead.
Thank you so much, Marcia. As Marcia said, the floor is open for questions and comments, but I will kind of start things rolling. Marcia's presentation underlines the importance of using the records fully, using one record to take you to another and to another, and also using all of the information that you'll find in the record. If you notice, Marcia, when she mentioned things like baptism records and so on, or marriages, she's also researching the witnesses. And these are carrying her on another path. So the importance of that, using the records as fully as possible, using not only baptism, marriage, and so on, but using things like the slave registers, for example, and also historical documents. You mentioned a document on education, articles in publications and so on, in order to provide context to your research. We do have a question here. Let's see. This is from Lisa Morris. That was a wonderful presentation of your research. Thank you for sharing. Can you share where you were able to find the educational records? Apologies if I missed where you may have indicated that already.
Thanks for that question. Thanks for that question. I think we have an echo here. Just give me a moment. Thanks for that question. If you go back when the presentation is uploaded and you utilize that slide where I present the information prepared in 1827 and documented dated 1828, if you Google that, you'll see the full report. The full book is, as it was published at the time, that full book is online, and it is extremely interesting and important at this stage in the West Indian history because it covers every island. The statistics cover every island in the West Indies, and it speaks not only about the numbers of children under instruction and the numbers of children in schools, but it speaks about the content of what was delivered in an instruction, and that underpins the development of the society that we live in up to today.
Thank you, Marcia. I just want to let listeners know that while Marcia was speaking, because the document report of the Incorporated Society for the Conversion and Religious Instruction and Education of the Negro Slaves was also new to me. And I actually searched using my phone and I found the full document on archive.org, and I actually sent it to my Gmail. So for sure, you can find that online. We have another submission. There's no name, just a device. Very informative. I have been looking into the bloodline of the nurse family in Barbados, Guyana, and England. Great-great-grandfather Samuel Francis Nurse. Can you shed anything on that, Marcia?
Thanks again. Yes. I would have to look at my research, my nurse research, but I would state that I am aware of that name as one of the names that I looked at with great detail when I was researching my nurse ancestry. If you contact Harriet, you will find that she can guide you towards that presentation I did, and maybe something in there can assist you with your research. If you want to contact me directly, then you can also do that. But off of the top of my head right now, I can't go completely into the nurse research. I think you will understand that right now, this particular presentation is very much in my mind. So with regards to the nurse surname, Harriet will guide you to the presentation I did on that subject, where my bloodline is concerned.
Thanks again, Marcia. Just want persons to know that our past presentations can be found on the museum's YouTube channel, including Marcia's several presentations. So go to YouTube, search Barbados Museum, and you will find the presentations for the Barbados Genealogy Group. Let's see. Okay. Serifa Colonial, good afternoon. I found your presentation quite riveting, Marcia. I have found the records very helpful in finding my ancestry. I am still facing some brick walls. I am just wondering how I can find the origin of my surname. I have traced so far to a William Connell, but I have trouble finding him on the slave registers. He is listed as a tradesman on my second great-grandfather's, my second great-grandfather's, his son's marriage record. So this is, he's looking for a name.
What I would suggest that you do is ensure that you have the records going back to the 1850 period and examine those records for the abode. Look at the residence and the parish. And if the record is a record that doesn't have an abode because it's a marriage record that didn't allow any of that, look at where the church was located, which parish. That will narrow down the registers that you need to go to. from what you said, I understand that the person that you have arrived at is called William Connell. Connell? Yes, Connell, William Connell. Now there will be several reasons that there could be several reasons why he carried that Connell name if he is a person from the 1850s. So what you need to look at is to ensure that you have the records, whether it's his baptism, his marriage, or a burial record, and it indicates which parish. And that will help you narrow down the register. Now, to locate Connells, all of these registers, once you have the parish, all of these registers also indicate the individuals who owned people and the individuals with plantations who owned people. So, for instance, if you have come to the point of the parish is St. Lucie, you then should access to quickly go to the correct register. You need to access by utilizing any of the plantation names down there and the enslavers who owned the plantation in 1834. So to find a plantation in St. Lucie, you could access the records on the UCL website for the parish of St. Lucie, and you will see the number of plantations there. And you can also, on their website, you can also apply the name Connell, and you would also see if the Connells received compensation at 1834. And that can guide you to, first of all, it doesn't say that your ancestor has a name because of that Connell, but it will guide you to establish a plantation name. Suppose the plantation was named Connells. Then you would know when you go to the registers that you're going forward to seek using the owner of the plantation's name to bring up on Ancestry.com the particular registers for the Connell persons. And then you can input William and see if William, because on the Ancestry.com is a very simple format. And then you can see the Williams are owned by the Connells. And that might have an implication as to why your William carried Connell. But it's not necessarily as simple as that. There are several ways that you have to go about moving from the 1850s, 40 periods onto the slave registers. And sometimes you have to go into the you don't see a link until the 1840s or the 1830s period, the post-emancipation period. So it's always important to take your time and to follow the steps and to look closely at the records that do have abode and residences, and then to look into that particular parish to see who had that surname and could have influenced the fact that your ancestor had it. Actually finding your ancestor named William has several other steps, which it would be impossible for me to go through right now, but I could offer my assistance to you at some point in time. Just make a contact. I'm open to doing this all the time.
Thanks again, Marcia. Right, okay, I think we have exhausted the questions on our Q&A. Just let me be sure. Okay, we have one from Lisa Morris who's asking if there are any online resources for wills. Have you used any online resources for wills?
Actually, to my knowledge, the wills that are housed at the Barbados Department of Archives for the periods that you might be interested in are not online. However, I'm confident that you should be able to access wills through that resource, and wills into that 1600 period and 1700 period. There are actually publications that cover the wills for those periods. And I know once Mr. Tate from Black Rock Books had some copies of those books where wills were transcribed and published from those 1700s periods. So that might be an avenue if you can't, and if it's the period that you're looking at and you can't go into the archives right now, but numerous wills exist at the archives.
Thank you, Marcia. I think Marcia was referring to the Barbados records. These are some volumes that were transcribed by Joanne Sanders. You have them for baptisms, marriages, and wills and administrations. I think the wills and administrations go to about 1725. The Journal of the Barbados Museum also has some abstracts of wills that were proved in England that related to the Caribbean, carried in our Journal of the Barbados Museum and Historical Society. And you must also remember that the British Archive would also have wills that were proved in England, of course, related to the Caribbean. So you can make use of those resources. Let's see if there's anyone else. Okay, no, I think we've exhausted the questions. One of the other things I wanted to mention, we're going quite long and we will wrap up shortly, but I also thought I would mention the fact that Marcia's presentation not only demonstrated the importance of mining the records fully, but also the importance of taking note of historical events that impacted their ancestors' lives and therefore the records that are in existence. So it is always good to have put your ancestors' lives within a historical context. She spoke about climatic and medical events, for example, hurricanes, the cholera epidemic. She spoke of migration. These are all things that would have impacted your ancestors' lives. So it's always important. Records, the baptisms, the wills, and all of those. And then the other records that persons may not use as much, the slave registers, resources, historical resources, and of course, taking note of events. So at this point, since we do not have, I think Marcia wants to say something. Let me just, okay.
I just wanted to share that I'm not sure how effective the first slides were. I was actually speaking, but I'm not sure that you could visualize the slides. I won't know this at the end of the presentation. But maps play a very important role. Looking at old maps and identifying on the old maps, you'll see the parish boundaries, and these maps start from 1681 and go right through to 1814 and beyond, 1847. And you see the names of landowners in various parishes, and that's an important thing to note as well, because it will, and it may influence the reason that a particular surname is used in a family. So I just wanted to make mention of that. I hope you all will be able to see the first slides, but I don't know. Okay, that's it. Thank you for joining me today.
Thank you, Marcia. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia. So at this point, I want to hope you will join with me in thanking Marcia for sharing her knowledge, which is quite vast, and taking the time to join us today to prepare such an extensive presentation and to share that knowledge with us, and also to offer to share it on a one-on-one basis. So thank you so much, Marcia.
You're welcome.
I also want to thank those of you who joined us on Zoom as well on Facebook Live. Remember, this program has been recorded and it will be uploaded to our YouTube channel in a week or so. So you can take note of that. And remember, you can also go to YouTube channel to access the past presentations. I also want to thank our technical person, Anastasia. Yes, you will notice that we've had some technical issues throughout the evening. So Anastasia has been keeping us on track. So thank you, Anastasia. And our next meeting is scheduled for September. I know the last time we were here, I had said that Dr. Honeychurch would have been presenting in July and Marcia in September, but we did a switch. So in September the 19th, Dr. Lennox Honeychurch will speak on the Barbados Dominica connection. So I hope to see you all on the 19th. So thanks again for joining us. Thank you, Marcia. And we will see you in September. Bye.